Hello everyone, we are back at it yet again with the tier list video. Today is episode 4 of the Monarch tier list, the English Monarch tier list. Hopefully we can get this done today. I'm hoping this can be the last day we do this. As you can see right here, we only have a few monarchs to go. We have the rest of the Hanovers in the house of Saxe, Coburg, and Gotha, and Windsor. Once we get those done, we'll be done. We're going to basically, today is mainly just going to be Great Britain we're going over. Because we finished off last time with William III, who was the last king of the last full monarch of independent England and Scotland. Before in 1707, they united to form Great Britain, which well, obviously was a great achievement under Queen Anne. So today is just going to be Great Britain. This is going to be 1702 to 2022. So we're going to be looking at 320 years of history today. The most recent, the most eventful time probably for the English monarchy, at least where the most change occurred. And I got my sister's whatever this thing is. It's meaty, that's for sure. I'll throw that up. I got some Valentine's candy right here. I'm going to be eating some of this right now. Let's see, what do we got? We got a chocolate bar. Hershey chocolate bar. A heart chocolate bar. It's got purple on it, so I mean, can't go wrong. So, I mean, we're going to rank these. Not really much else to say. If you watched the past, please go watch the last 3 episodes where we rank Alfred the Great to William III. Let's do a quick recap first before we get started. So, in SSS Plus tier, we have George II, of course. Now, I'm not going to go into him because we are going to get into him later in the video. But again, we were talking about him for an hour last time. I'm not going to get too much into why he's an S tier, and we will get to that in a sec once we get to George II, because I can't just skip over him. In the S tier, we have Henry III, Edward I, Edward III, Henry V. And again, if you want to see the reasons why, go check out the last episodes. In A, we have Alfred the Great, Athelstan, William the Conqueror, Henry II, Elizabeth I, and James I. In B, we have Edgar the Peaceful, Canute the Great, Edward the Confessor, Henry I, Henry VII, and William and Mary. William III and Mary II, specifically. In C, we have Edward the Elder, Edmund I, Edward II, Henry IV, Henry VI, Charles II, James II, and William III on his own. Then in D, we got who's this? Edred, Edwig, Athelred the Unready, Harold Harefoot, I don't know how you say that, Harthcanute, William II, Richard I, Richard II, and Charles I. And then in F we have Harold Godwinson, King Stephen, King John, Edward IV, Richard III, Henry VIII, Mary I, and Oliver Cromwell. And then finally for the indecisives, these are the ones that, basically, for those of you who don't know, indecisive is basically the tier that the monarch just wasn't on the throne long enough to really had a chance to do anything. And those include Sven Forkbeard, Edmund Ironside, also known as Edmund II, Edward V, Edward VI, Lady Jane Grey, and Richard Cromwell. So, those guys really, again, didn't get much of a chance to do anything. So, we're going to get started here with Queen Anne. Alright, so Queen Anne, obviously a very good monarch. One of the last queens we've ever had, the third to last queen. She's on the throne from 1702 to 1714. During her reign, England and Scotland officially unite to form Great Britain in 1707, which was a great union. So, she takes the throne after William III dies in 1702. She does not inherit the Dutch title because she's not the most senior heir. She was actually the most senior descendant left alive of James II. James II had 2 daughters with his first wife, but again, because he married a second time and was Catholic, he was forced to get off the throne. Although he was dead by this point anyway. And his eldest daughter was Mary, and she reigned alongside her husband William, who was also a grandson of Charles I. They both became king and queen. But then Mary died in 1694, and then William III took the throne and reigned for the next 8 years on his own. And then when he died, the throne then passed to Mary II's younger sister, Anne. I believe she was about 3 years younger than Mary II. So there's Queen Anne. Again, on top of Queen Anne, she's queen during the formation of Great Britain, which is amazing. She's the last Stuart monarch. Now, but I feel so bad for Queen Anne because she had Queen Anne had like 17 children, but none of them actually survived to adulthood. There's only one that really survived very long, which was his name was Prince William of Gloucester. He was her only surviving child, and he died shortly after his 11th birthday. I think he died in 1700, actually, during William III's reign. But yeah, Queen Anne obviously got chocolates named after her. This actually brings back a weird story from a few weeks ago. So February 6th was Queen Anne's birthday, of course. And I was in Walmart or Target or something. I don't know what it was, but one of those big stores, you know. And I was looking for Queen Anne chocolates. I couldn't find any because I wanted to eat some for her birthday, but those are actually really good. They got the cherries in them. I think they're only seasonal, though, which is why they didn't have them. Or they might have had them, and I just am terrible at looking. But yeah, they got the cherries in them. For that reason alone, I think Anne is a solid B tier monarch. She's slightly above average. Didn't do anything outstanding for England, but she was a good queen nonetheless. Okay, so also during this time, I want to try to recall some of the people that we didn't call yesterday. So we're going to start call Nicholas first. We're just going to see here if Nico actually wants to answer the phone or not. We're going to start by calling him on Snapchat, see if he answers this. If this doesn't work, we'll try his phone number. Also, I'm very tired today. If you guys aren't aware, we have a big weekend ahead of us for videos, so look forward to that. Alright, Nicholas. Hopefully you guys can hear that. I'll just sit that up there. Something tells me he's not going to answer. Trying to preserve this chocolate, but nope, he didn't answer. Let's try his cell or his phone number. So, Henry the Third. All right. We will be calling Bruno in a sec. I'm gonna call to him once we get to later in the video. There we go. So anyway, yeah, we're talking about that's Queen Anne. So we need to get Nicholas on here so he can tell us about Henry the Third. Up here, because he didn't get a chance to talk about it. I'm telling you guys, he always answers the phone when I'm not recording. It's a thing. When I click record, he never answers. I don't know why. That's just how it is. Come on, Nicholas. Well, he didn't answer, so I'm not going to mess with that any longer. Let's see here. All right. Anyways, we're moving on here to George the First. Alright, so George I obviously is king from 1714 to 1727. So they passed a law that bars Catholics from inheriting the throne. So after Anne dies, again, her only son he died when he was like 11. So that's what happened. So they had to go all the way over to Hanover, on the other side of the tree. Basically, James I had a daughter named, I think her name was Mary Stuart. I think it was Mary Stuart. Is it Mary or Margaret? I don't know. It's going to bog me. I need to look this up. Actually, no, I don't. I think it was Mary. Let's see here. Oh, nice. So there's Sophia of Hanover was her name. She was the elector because she was the most. Yeah, it was Elizabeth Stuart. Her youngest daughter was the only legitimate child that was actually Protestant. All of the other ones were Catholic. So any Catholic individual, and that's still the case to this day, if you're Catholic, you cannot inherit the throne of England or Great Britain or the UK, whatever you want to call it. Which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But But I mean, that's George the First. So they go all the way to Hanover, and the next person in line to the throne is Sophia of Hanover. Now she actually dies, so she's like, you know what? That's gonna have to be Queen Anne's heir, because Queen Anne now she's not gonna have any more children. She's already tried like 17 times and failed all times. She came close, didn't succeed though. So Sophia, he was the elector. Now she was like over 30 years old in Queen Anne. She was about the same age as James II, Charles II. She actually died a few months before Queen Anne. So it was her son George who became king. Now the interesting thing about George the First is he was actually from Germany. So Hanovers were in Germany. They were so far off the line of succession that they literally didn't even speak English anymore. Now most people didn't like the idea of having a German king as a thing. So he takes throne in 1714. He barely spends any time in England during his reign at all. He barely spends any time in England during his reign. In fact, he basically speaks German. He never actually learns English. I think George II actually tried. But yeah, he's like in his 50s. He comes into England, doesn't know anything about English, and a lot of people in Great Britain are like, you know what? Why is the King of England not even speak English? This makes absolutely no sense. So he didn't even live in England. So they didn't really have a real king. But he was known during his reign as King Georg. Georg the First, as you know, because George is in English. In German, it's Georg. So that was him. Again, he's the first king from the new house of Hanover. Hanover is the new house now, named after his father, the electors of Hanover, who Sophia married. Sophia of Hanover married. That was his father. But George, again, he's not. Since you got a new king that speaks German now, is the King of England. This is when the Prime Minister starts to come into play. They add the first Prime Minister named Robert Walpole. I forget what year it was. Let me look it up here. What year was Robert Walpole become Prime Minister? It was in... what year did Robert Walpole become Prime Minister? Still got my thing here. I don't know. It was 1725. That was what it was. So toward the end of George I's reign, the monarchy starts to lose a lot of power because the power has now shifted from full control with the monarch to a prime minister for the first time. So now the rule is split. And again, previously in 1689, they had signed the English Bill of Rights. So the monarchs, like now, are increasingly losing power, which is not good. So here's George I. I mean, he does look good. We might as well pull him up too here. I got George II up here. We'll get to him in a sec because I got to call some more people for that. Okay, so that's George I. He's pretty solid overall. Not too much to say about him. Let's call Ben here, see what he's got to say about George I. Benjamin? Where is Benjamin? There he is. Alright. Now, he didn't answer yesterday, so we're going to hope he can answer the phone. If he doesn't answer, then whatever. He actually told me, he texted me last night after I called him, he's like, you can I'll answer tomorrow. Alright, we'll see. I highly doubt he will. Well, Ben didn't answer the phone. Alright, so here's what happens. So, George the First, he's really old, so he doesn't actually reign that long. But George the First, I mean, he's got some pretty nice hair too. Not as good as George the Second's hair, but his hair looks pretty good. So I think we gotta give him. I don't know what we should give George the First. Here. Let's see. Not really sure here. It's almost 7, so let me see. Let's try to call Nathan. Again, so George the First, he's hard to rank for me. I think we could give him he's kind of just a C tier again, because he really, I mean, you can't rank him too high. I don't think you can rank him too low, because he obviously completely changes the monarchy. The monarchy basically just becomes German from this point forward, and that only happens again when Queen Victoria marries a German, Prince Albert, which was her cousin. Yeah, weird stuff. But yeah, that's just how that is. So next up is George the Second. Now, we already talked about George II yesterday, but we are going to go on a little scheme with him here. So for those of you that aren't aware, George II has the best hair of any monarch, actually of any human to ever walk the earth. See right here? We're actually going to pull him up again. Now, I did a whole thing yesterday on this, but we're going to actually have to come up here. Let's see. How do we zoom in here? Let's zoom in. Alright, now he's way too far over. My face is probably blocking it. No, that's way too far over that way. There we go. That probably looks good, right? Okay. Well, anyway, we gotta call some people. Let's try to call everyone that did not give their input yesterday and see if they answer. So we already already told Nicholas. Let's try to call Nathaniel. If Nathaniel doesn't answer, we have to call someone else here. I'm gonna tell Nathaniel it's for a video. Maybe he'll answer actually. Oh, I gotta make full screen. Alright. So George II, his hair looks so freaking good. Like, just for his hair alone puts him in the SSS plus tier. Obviously one of the coolest monarchs to ever live. He's not my favorite English monarch, but when it comes to looks, he is. Now, we gotta call Christina right now, because I told her that she wanted to be in the video yesterday. She couldn't answer the phone because of she's at the basketball game, and she's got a lot to say about George II's hair. So let's see if she answers the phone. If she doesn't, then that sucks. Well, let's see. All right, this is probably gonna be the last person we call for a while. I know they were just at a basketball game, and they wanted me to go, but I'm like, I can't. Because I'm like, I don't have any way of getting there. So anyway, George II, again, his hair it's so good. You got the curls all over the place. There's kind of a dispute if this is a wig or if this is his actual hair, but I personally think. Alright, well, he didn't answer, so, well, she said she'd be available from 6:30 to 7, so we'll see if she calls back. Because I think she's gonna get mad again if she isn't in the video, because she really wanted to be in the video. Alright, let's try to call Schmeat to end it off here. This is gonna be the last person we call, but I really want to get Schmeat on here too, because I know Schmeat likes George II as well. He is the man. So George II, he actually dies on the toilet. If I didn't already tell that to you before, he was basically drinking a cup of hot chocolate, and he went into the bathroom, and then he had a heart attack in the bathroom. There was kind of a dispute going on, because me and Bruno yesterday, we decided, like, do you think someone poisoned his hot chocolate and he actually got poisoned? Because how would you know back in the 17... Why is no one answering? This is stupid. Okay, well, we didn't Vigo on yesterday. Let's call Vigo. This is the last person we're calling, and I already said that back in the several times ago. And we'll see if any of these people call back. Vigo! Oh my God! What are you doing?
I'm playing a game right now.
Alright, so you're on the video right now. Can you see me?
Hold on, I need to open my phone.
I opened that up so you.
Yeah, I see you.
So we're doing the tier list video right now. Now I already did George II a lot yesterday, but you were one of the few people that didn't answer yesterday. So I know since you have the best nose on Earth, I need you to judge the guy with the best hair. So George II, what do you have to say about his hair, Vigo?
It's great hair. I mean, pretty basic, but I mean, it's pretty good.
It looks so good, doesn't it? So you think that's real, right? There's no way that's a wig.
No, that's definitely a wig.
That is not a wig, Vigo. Look, there's a hairline right there.
Well, yeah, you can see it slightly, like the head, like the wig slightly above.
Yeah, but it's
You can see like the rest of his head, like you can see a slight like different hair color.
No, here's what he did. So he spent years cutting this out just for this painting. He actually cut his hair just to the right spot. He wanted to make it look like a wig, but in reality, it was actually his hair cut. Dude, it's so good. I put him in the triple S plus tier because his hair was so good, and just for that reason alone, he was a good king too. So can you tell me who his father was? Who was George II's father?
George I.
Yeah, Vigo knows his stuff, guys. Vigo knows his stuff. So again, we're gonna go back on the tier list. Let's go back on the tier list. Alright, so we already ranked George II. Again, I got him up here. Oh yeah, he looks great. He's the king of them all at the top. So he might not actually be the only one in there. So Big I just wanted to get your input on his hair. So I'll see you later.
Alright, see you, Jen.
Goodbye, senor. Alright. Let's call Bruno back here. Call Elizabeth II. So Bruno said he wanted to be in the video. He wanted to finish off the tier list with me, which we're gonna do. So yeah. Come on, Bruno. I might have to finish this out by myself, but we have the rest. These next ones are actually going to be very interesting to rank. Obviously, we have these two at the end because they're just, not really everything, because they put Henry VI in there twice for some reason.
This is Taylor's dad. Quit calling him.
Well, never mind.
The mailbox is full and cannot accept it.
Well, I told him I'd get ready at 6:30. It's 6:53. So I guess we're just going to have to do this on our own right now. Anyway, so next up we have King George III. Now, George III, he's one of the best... No, he's not one of. The best British monarch, the best English monarch of all time, in my opinion. And here's why. So, as we discussed earlier, George II died in 1760. And his son was Frederick, the Prince of Wales, and he dies in 1753, about 7 years before George II does. So Frederick dies, but Frederick, he's the Prince of Wales. He actually had... Oh, Elizabeth's calling me back. Bruno's calling me back. Bro! How you doing? Alright, we're back on the tier list. So, guess who we're on?
Hello.
King George III.
Oh yeah.
You got him. You came in on just the right time. So I was telling you that Frederick dies before George II. So George II is succeeded by his grandson George III, right, Bruno?
Yeah.
So what year do you think George III became king? Yes.
1783.
You're actually pretty close. Well, you gotta think about that answer real quick. If he was king during the American Revolution, that would put him before 1775. So take another guess.
So when was it?
Take another guess. Keep guessing until you get it right. I'll tell you if it's higher or lower. I'll tell you if it's earlier or later.
1743.
Later. Way later. You're like pretty far off.
Wait, is it after 1775?
It was before 1775.
Oh, okay.
So what year did George II die?
don't remember.
Okay, so Frederick died in 1753, so it's going to be in between 1753 and 1775, somewhere in that range. So what would you say?
70.
Nope.
1766.
Closer, but nope. Keep going down. Keep going down.
What?
Keep going down.
You going down?
Yeah.
1760.
He got it spot on, 1760. Do you know what day of the year it was?
What?
You know what day of the year it was? Just kidding, you don't need to know that. It was October 25th. Oh, is this your brother, Bruno?
Yeah, my brother just left.
No, how many brothers do you have? Like 10?
I have 4 younger brothers, and I'm the oldest.
How many? Do you have any sisters?
No.
So you have 4 brothers, and they're all younger than you?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I bet they get annoying sometimes too. Anyway, so George III, we gotta get back into topic. Speaking of a lot of kids, George III actually had the most legitimate kids out of any monarch. He had a total of, I think, 15 kids. 15!
Yeah. 15?
Or 16, one of the two. He had that many legitimate kids. That's legitimate. That means with his queen, he had 15 children.
Ah.
That could all become kings, so. Or queen.
Wait, with the same wife?
Yeah, with his own wife. He had 15 kids with her. Those two alone had 15 kids. I think he had two illegitimate kids. I think he had a total of 17, but 2 of them were with a mistress, but he had 15 legitimate. And 2 illegitimate. So obviously George III is king for a total of 60 years, from 1760 to 1820. Alright, that is a just completely different time periods, honestly. The world basically is changing throughout those 60 years. A lot happens. As you know.
Don't you think he got tired of it?
Huh?
Don't you think he got tired of it?
Of what, being king?
Years?
I don't know. I don't know.
I'd be bored.
With being king for 60 years straight.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the king, so I mean, you're getting luxury life, but like at the same time, you have to live in like that proper way. You don't really get any freedom. Like you can't like go out and pick your nose in public and stuff like that. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Not like I pick my. Okay, I do sometimes, but that's besides the point. Anyway, so George III, he's obviously king during the American Revolution. Now, I love George III. For the main reason is because obviously he looks great too. He doesn't look as good as George II, but he does look fantastic with his yellow suit in the painting. I think he was like, how old was he? 22 when he became king. He was pretty young, and then lived to be 82, 81, something like that. So basically, he's king during the American Revolution, and as Americans like me and Bruno are, we are the most associated with George III than any other monarch in British history. And I mean, you can agree with that because he's basically, I mean, if you're going to blame one person on the United States going to war with Britain, it was King George III.
Yeah.
Who else was it? So, if it wasn't for King George III, heck, we could still be a British colonies right now. We could still be owned by Britain to this day. Which is kind of crazy to think about. But if it wasn't for George III, because he was the one that taxed us originally, which I don't think was a bad move. Because, you remember, back in the French and Indian War, it actually ended during his reign. It started in the 1750s and then ended in 1763. I think it started in 1758, right at the end of George II's reign. And then when George III took the throne, he was still dealing with that. That ended in 1763, and then the British got the whole land out by the Ohio River Valley in the current Midwestern U.S. That land from France, because that was originally owned by France, and they got it from France. But Britain spends so much money on that war that by the time the war was over, they did eventually win, but they were basically broke. So George III came up with a brilliant idea. He's like, you know what? Why don't we tax the American colonists? You know, it was their land we fought for. I mean, they should pay up some money, and maybe we can get some money again to actually run the country. So they decided to do that. The Americans, on the other hand, were completely furious, mainly Massachusetts, So they start with there's like the proclamation line they put in, which they basically say, you know what, we're not going to let the colonists go west of the Appalachian Mountains. I think that was in 1763, right after the French and Indian War ended. But the revolution basically started in Boston, Massachusetts, because you had the Boston Tea Party and then the Boston Massacre. Yeah. Those two events really sparked the revolution. It really started in Massachusetts, and then all the other colonies joined in, and you're like, you know what? We're not paying these taxes. We have been living here since freaking 1607 for over 150 years, and you just now decide to tax us? Really, George? Now, I am an American, and I'm speaking on behalf of the other side here. Now, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I honestly think that George III was actually being smart with taxing. I think the Americans and the colonists were actually the bad guys rebelling against the king, which is not a good thing to do. They were basically being rebellious. And we see that nowadays as a great thing that we did that, but in hindsight, when you're looking at it from a British perspective, we were completely crooked people. Like, why would... It was kind of mean. We shouldn't have done that. So, I mean, like, you know, I obviously have different views from that, but I just think, personally, that the American Revolution shouldn't have really happened, and I think we just kind of overreacted with the taxation. I think we should have just paid the taxes and dealt with it. That's what I would have done.
Yeah.
Now, I do understand that, like, you know, I get why they're like, you know, we shouldn't have to pay these because we've been living here for hundreds of years. We've been living here for generations and never had to pay them until now, which I can see how that could make you mad. But so you could honestly blame that as a negative for James I for not starting the taxes. But at the same time, you can't really blame it on him because I don't know how much of the American Revolution was in James I's control, considering that it happened like over 160 years after he died. You can't blame that on James I, because he didn't know what was going on. But I love George III, and he tries to win the war. Basically, originally Britain just thought this thing was going to be a joke, and it was really bad. He was not very good for Britain after that, because when he lost the colonies after the war was over, that was a major defeat for Britain. Now, some people think you know, they just lost the colonies. We never really had anything to do with Britain in the first place, so why would they be mad? No. The colonies were actually really good use for Britain because they had all of that new supplies and resources that were in the Americas that they didn't have in Europe. And they really needed that land because it was basically over double the size of the current Britain at the time. And losing that was really bad for them. So people would give that negative on George III. Now, I don't think George III is actually as bad as people think. I do think he was a good king. He did lose the colonies, but I don't think anyone else would have really done much better, let's be honest. So, that's kind of how that is. But again, the war does seem to be going his way at the beginning. The British do very good at the beginning, especially, obviously, they take New York, and that was a major loss by the colonists early in the war. The British actually seemed like they were actually going to win that, especially being the most powerful army in the world. Another thing that led to their downfall was the French, because John Adams went to France, and he basically asked Louis XVI if their armies could come and join the Americans to battle against Britain, so they could win. And France is like, you know what? We want to get revenge from Britain anyway, because we don't even like them. So they helped out with the war, and that was how that was. But the British suffered major defeats at Trenton and Princeton, and especially Yorktown. Yorktown was the one that really sucked for them the most. However, in 1777 and 1775. During the beginning of the war, when they did siege and invade New York, they actually took it from Washington's forces. And they got that, which it seemed like the war, it was on the upper hand, but it didn't work out too well for him. Bruno, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. My brothers were screaming in the background, so I muted.
Okay. So what do you have to say about George III again?
What?
What do you have to say about George III?
I think he deserves like a solid A, I'd say.
He was a good king, no matter how much you admit it or not. I mean, obviously history went in a certain direction, and the colonies did rebel, and we did win the war and become our own country. But, again, if there's one person responsible for the revolution starting, it's King George III. So for our existence itself as a country, George III is the main guy. Now you would say Washington. Now Washington did not start the revolution himself. He was the guy basically that won the revolution for us, but he did not start it himself. It was George III that started it. It was kind of crazy because it was like George versus George. It was George III versus George Washington. And that war was kind of funny. Most people don't realize that. It was like the Battle of the Georges, which is kind of cool. And they were around the same age too. Washington was only a few years older than George III. I think he was about 6 years older than George III, so they were about the same age going into that. Again, we can't forget the fact that after that, George III kept the British soldiers in the Americas for several years after that, and basically they didn't want to accept their defeat. And then he ended up going to war with the United States again in 1812. Now, George III was still king during the War of 1812, which a lot of people don't realize, but he was. So he actually went to war with the colonies twice. Technically 3 times, but you don't count the French and Indian War because he was just fighting with them. So that's kind of how that is. But I think George III is awesome. Okay, I gotta call you back here, Bruno.
Okay.
I'll be right back in a few minutes.
Alright.
Okay. Okay, Christina said she's ready. What's going on? Okay, so I'm in the middle of making the tier list right now. We're talking about George III right now. So what do you guys have to say about George III?
George III is an amazing man, y'all.
Yeah.
I hope you guys get to learn more about him every day.
Okay, so I was going to put him in S tier because, obviously, if anyone is responsible for the United States, it's George III. But here's why I wanted to call you guys. Check this out. I want to get your guys' opinion on King George II's hair real quick. Okay, here we go. Oh, how was the basketball game?
Good, we won.
Sorry I couldn't come.
Gosh, that is the best hair I've ever seen.
See what I mean, guys? The hair is amazing.
Yeah, that's the best hair.
So, this is real, right? There's no way this is a wig.
Yeah, it's so real. Totally real.
Oh, yeah. So,
Are you in your video?
yeah, you're in the video right now. This is the camera.
Hey guys! Hey YouTube! YouTube!
Okay, now they can see you.
Hey YouTube!
So that's George II. I put him in an S plus tier because he's so good. Obviously, do you guys know the story on how he died?
No, we do not, but you can tell us.
Okay, here's what happened. So he was drinking hot chocolate one day, and he went into the bathroom and sat on the toilet, and then he just had a heart attack.
Oh my
So
God.
he was the second monarch to actually die on the toilet. So that was
Terrible way to die.
yeah, it is actually kind of embarrassing. I guess he didn't feel good. He was drinking the chocolate and he didn't feel good, so he wanted to go to the bathroom to try to get some of the stuff out, and then he just ended up having a heart attack. But I was talking to Bruno about this earlier because you don't know if that's actually the case, because was there actually someone in there watching him to know he had a heart attack? So we kind of think that someone might have poisoned his hot chocolate.
That's a good chance, Trent. That's a good conspiracy theory.
And he might have got assassinated.
I can.
Yeah, he is awesome. But who would do that? Where are you guys at? Are you guys in the locker room?
We're in the locker room.
Did you guys win the game?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry I couldn't come.
I was looking for you.
I don't have a ride. I couldn't get there until everyone's at a soccer game right now.
Oh.
So yeah. So there's George II. Dude, he's freaking awesome.
He is.
I did a whole thing yesterday talking about it for an hour. So we're getting to George III here. So his son was Frederick. He dies before George II. He dies a few years before. So it's his grandson, George III, who becomes king. Right here, my man. Dude, George III is the best. Actually, we gotta put him in at the top, too.
Yeah.
Again, he was the king during the American Revolution. And if there's one person responsible for the United States even becoming a country, it's this guy. And it's kind of crazy to think about, because if he would have never taxed us in the first place, we could still be British colonies to this day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that was a smart move by him, taxing us, because he was, previously he was king during the French and Indian War, and that ended, and Britain was so broke because they spent all the money fighting that war. And then immediately after, he's like, you know what? We can just get money from the colonists. So that's what they do, and then they rebel. And then
you should become a history teacher.
Here's the thing about that, though. I want to, but at the same time, I can't deal with children at all. So, I think this is a good history teacher. Oh, guys, I want to tell you guys something right now. I'm actually going to Abraham Lincoln's birthplace. Actually, let me show my face. Tomorrow I'm going to Abraham Lincoln's birthplace in Kentucky. I'm doing two things in Kentucky. I'm doing the horse cemetery, and then I'm doing the Lincoln birthplace. I'm going to post that on President's Day. It's going to be the President's Day special.
That's a good idea, because like President's Day is around his birthday.
Yeah, it is. Oh, actually, Washington's birthday is right after President's Day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to that, and then I'm going to do the horse cemetery in Lexington.
That's awesome. Yeah, you said that. Kurt, you need to add me back on Snapchat so we can snap.
Okay. Oh, didn't you ask me add me before? I didn't respond. I do the one friend a month thing. I got like a wait list going, but I'll add you right now.
Your wait list. Can I be second friend this month?
So okay, here's what I do. So I do one friend a month. So on March 1st, let me know and I'll accept it.
Okay, because that's my birthday month. So that's
it's my birthday month too.
Oh yeah, we're the same birthday. Wait, no, you're older than me.
I'm literally like, okay, what time of day were you born, Hallee?
Like 3 in the morning.
3 in the morning? I was born at 7 p.m. on the 21st. So we're like a few hours. I'm like a few hours older than you. It's crazy.
Yeah. Alright, well, we gotta go.
Okay, so I'll see you guys later. So you guys think George III and George II are the best monarchs to ever exist. Got them both at the top. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Okay, that was that. So, I think they enjoyed that. What's Olivia doing stem? Alright, we gotta call Bruno back here. Call Bruno. Call Queen Elizabeth II. Alright, let's call him back here. Alright, that's George III. We're moving on now. I just had a basketball game. Alright, Bruno. I think he was messing around with his brothers, too. I actually have the same water from yesterday. So if you guys heard, I got big plans this week, and I just told them. I'm going to Abraham Lincoln's birthplace.
This is Taylor's dad. Quit calling him.
Bruno! I swear. Call Elizabeth II. Actually, he'll call back. He'll call back for sure. Alright, we'll just wait. We'll just sit here. Anyway, so we're moving on. Next up is King George IV. Now, George IV, obviously, he's the eldest son of George III. He actually ends up coming to the throne in 1830. Now, since George III lived so long, he was really, let me see here. He was pretty old by the time George III died. I think he was, let me think. I think he was in his 50s. He was like 58, something crazy like that. Now, he is the eldest son of George III. Now, obviously, as we discussed earlier, George III had, like, how many kids? 15 kids. Absolutely insane. So yeah, George IV was the eldest of those. He ends up ruling from 1820 to 1830. He's king for about 20 years, 10 years. Oh my god, I can't do math. 10 years. How could I not do that? George IV, obviously, he's not too terrible. I do think he looks good too. Most of the Georges, I love all the Georges, but George IV has gotta be one of the more inferior ones, right? So, something like that. Oh, Bruno's calling back. All right, Bruno. Bruno, I just got. Sorry, I had to call someone else there.
You what?
I had to call somebody else that I was trying to call earlier.
Who was it?
It was Christina. She wanted to be on the video, so I called her back. Showed her George III and George II.
Answer?
Yeah, she actually did answer. I tried to call her earlier, and then she answered back, called back. So I had to hang up. So anyway, we're on to George IV now. We just did George III and George II, so we're done talking about them. Again, I just want to let you guys know that I love those two kings. They're the best to ever live. They're only going to be the only two in SSS+. I ended up putting George III in SSS+, Bruno, because he's so good. I love George III. He's literally my wallpaper on my phone. No joke. No joke. Literally, look at this. Well, you can't see. Actually, let me... Look, not even joking. George III. Anyhow. So that's him. Alright, we're on to George IV. George IV, as I said earlier, was the eldest son of George III, obviously. Now, George I is... Oh my god, I can't talk. George IV is only king for about 10 years. He doesn't really do too much, honestly, as king, so he's going to be kind of hard to rank. He's probably going to be one of those C tier guys. Do you have anything to say about George IV, Bruno?
I'm looking at a picture, and I think the dude likes turtlenecks.
What? I don't even know what that means, Bruno. He looks...
has like something that covers up his neck.
Oh, yeah.
Fluffy thing.
Oh, on his, the thing he's wearing? Oh, yeah, he does have that. That's what the kings wore back in the early 1800s.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm digging it.
Oh, yeah. He was the eldest son of George III. He was well known for his amorous nature. He was basically the exact opposite of George III. Very lazy, for the most part. Oh, we got to talk about the fact that George III went mad in his later years, and he had some sort of blood disease, and he literally just went catatonic the past few years of his reign, and then died. He was diagnosed with a disease at the end of 1819, about Christmas, and then they basically said he was going to die, and he couldn't see. He went blind, and then he died a month later.
Really?
Yeah, that's how George III went out. Anyways, he donated his father's collection of books to the British Museum Library, which was kind of cool. That's something that George IV does that doesn't really get talked about too much.
Yeah.
He loved building projects, and a lot of the prominent buildings in London were built during his reign. I don't know. He loved art. That was one of George IV's big things. And yes, he was king during the big part of the Napoleonic Wars. Luckily, Napoleon, just like Hitler, they did not get to England because England's isolated. Their main targets were France, Spain, Germany, those kind of places. The big land.
Yeah.
They didn't really, because England's kind of isolated in the thing. So he was king during that, but he didn't really do too much with the Napoleonic Wars because Napoleon ended up founding the Empire of France anyway. And yes, he did hate his wife. George IV hated his wife. What I mean by this is they actually completely despised each other. And I don't know if she hated him, but he hated her. And they actually ended up only having one child, basically, because, I mean, they had to have an heir, so... Her name was Caroline of Brunswick, and because you know how they had arranged marriages back then, they didn't actually marry for love, they married just to keep the wealth, so that's just who he was assigned, and he hated Caroline so much. I don't know why, he just didn't like her. So they only had one kid. Sadly, though, their daughter's name was Charlotte, and she died at age 21, shortly after marrying the King of Belgium, but she died actually during George III's reign, so she never was able to take the throne, and George IV never had any other kids. Any other legitimate kids besides Charlotte, but Charlotte died in 1817. So that was kind of sucked for him. Anyway, so yeah, that was he's kind of interesting. Now he's going to be one of the really hard ones to rank, I think, actually. Let's see here. How many illegitimate children? You know, he only had one child. He didn't even have any illegitimate children. Oh yeah, George the... Wait, did George the Fourth buy Windsor Castle, or was it George the Third? I think it was actually George the Third. Never mind. George the Third also bought Windsor Castle. There's so many things George the Third did for the monarchy. It's insane. I can't even hit it all. I could do a whole video just talking about George the Third, I think. But
You should.
I should, you know, maybe for his birthday.
Hey, when's his birthday?
June 4th.
Yeah.
Not bad. That would have been ironic if it was July 4th. Again, he's king during the 1800s, and during this time the monarchs are kind of losing power. At this point, there's really almost no power left to speak of, but George IV kind of does have power. You obviously have the prime ministers now, which really suck. I think George the Fourth is just one of those, you know, C-tier guys. I mean, he didn't really do anything extraordinary, but he didn't necessarily do anything bad either.
Yeah.
He was just kind of middle of the road. A lot of interesting things about him as a person, but none of that really makes him a good or bad king. So, yeah, that's George IV. So George IV, as I said before, his daughter Charlotte dies in 1817. He's got no more kids to take the throne after him after he dies. So George III at the throne has now passed to the second son of George III. However, he was dead. His name was Frederick von Hanover, and he died without any kids. So that line's dead. So the throne passed to the third son, William. Now William IV, a lot of people don't know. William IV was actually the third son of George III. The second son was Frederick, and he died. It's ironic, like, why do these Fredericks keep dying? It's the second Frederick to die. No Frederick has ever become king, and they were so close to, but they never actually lived long enough. That kind of sucks. So anyway, William became the new king, and he became William IV. Now the major thing, he's king during from 1830 to 1837, and William IV is solid. I think we're gonna have to give him a B tier because he's king in the 1830s when Britain outlaws slavery. The United States didn't outlaw slavery until 1865, but Britain actually outlawed it in the 1830s under William's reign. So I think for that reason alone, he's got to be a B tier because he's. Other than that, though, I mean, he was only king for 7 years. Didn't really have the opportunity to do too much. Again, he was old. Fun fact: he was actually the oldest king when he became king. He was the oldest person. I think he was born in 1765 and became king in 1830, so he would have been 65? No. Yeah, 65. That is obviously going to change when Charles becomes king, though, but as it stands right now, William IV was the oldest king that came to the throne. He was 65 when he became king. Which is crazy, because if you're 65 in 1830, you're basically almost dead. So that's, again, he only lived 7 years after that, so I think he died when he was probably about 72. So, a problem arises when he dies. Because, guess what?
What?
He doesn't have any kids, either.
He doesn't?
Nope. He has a lot of illegitimate kids. He never has any legitimate kids. That's the third son. George III's first 3 sons never have any kids, except George IV, but his daughter died young.
Did he have a wife?
He did. I think so. I mean, yeah, he did, but they never had any kids. Let me count his illegitimate kids. He had a good amount of illegitimate. He's kind of like Charles II. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He had 11 illegitimate. That's more than Charles II. Holy shinotic. Dang, these guys. He had 11 illegitimate children, but none of them could take the throne. That's crazy. Okay, so next up, who comes after the third son? The fourth son. Guess what? He's dead too. So the first 4 sons of George the Third are all dead. Luckily, though, George the Third's 4th son, Edward, the Duke of Kent, has a daughter, an 18-year-old daughter, who is legitimate. So she can actually become queen, and she becomes Queen Victoria. after William dies. So the throne went from George III to his eldest son, to the third son, to the fourth son's daughter. It kind of jumped around all over the place because George III himself had a lot of kids, but his kids did not have very much kids. Again, Victoria was the only child of Edward, the Duke of Kent. And again, if England would have followed male-only primogeniture, which means that only males can inherit, it would have had to pass to the fifth son. And I think he might have been dead too by that point. Let's see. The fifth son was Ernest. No, he was alive. The fifth son was alive, actually. But the first four were all dead. So that's freaking insane. What happened there? But I mean, what's the luck of the draw, Victoria? Because she didn't have any cousins. Her only cousin was Charlotte, and she died young, obviously. And then both of her uncles never had any kids, William and Frederick. So Victoria becomes king in 1837 after William IV dies. Now Victoria, this is a sad time. This is where England finally takes its last steps toward constitutional monarchy. It's during her reign. She's queen for a whopping 63 years, the second longest in history, next to Elizabeth II, of course. She's king from 1837 all the way to 1901.
Dang.
Yeah, that's a long time. So, I mean, if you can just take those dates into perspective, 1837, 1901, the world is changing very fast during her reign. Monarchs are kind of dying off. This is the age where, especially since what we saw happen in the United States, the United States was really the first true presidential democracy. We were really the first ones to really have a democracy. And once all the other powers, like France and stuff, they saw that we overthrew and revolted against Britain, that they thought they were going to do the same thing. And that's what happened with the French Revolution, almost less than a decade after the American Revolution, where they beheaded Louis XVI. The European countries at this time, and countries all over the world, started to abolish their monarchies during this period because they thought monarchs, those are Middle Ages things. Now, most countries are now controlled by the people. We don't have slavery anymore. People still have rights. There's just no form in having there's no reason in having one person rule anymore. It's just not fair, is what they think.
Yeah.
Which I completely disagree, but it's just how it is. So Victoria, it becomes a constitutional monarchy, which means they had a constitution. So Parliament is now a thing. Now you obviously always had a prime minister, but when you had the prime minister from George IV to George I to William IV, but all those monarchs in between there, they had the superior power over the prime minister. Victoria was the first one where now the prime minister actually takes precedence over her. Victoria is just now, the monarch now is basically just a ceremonial title. They appoint the prime minister, they bestow honors upon people, and they're basically there to look really, really rich. And that's basically the only reason to have a monarch now in those times.
Yeah.
But the reason Victoria got to stay on the throne, though, and Louis XVI did not, is because the monarchy was extremely popular by the people. So many people loved the royal family with Victoria. And that's the reason she got to stay on the throne. Now, she was queen during one of the most crucial hours of the British monarchy, the mid-1800s. Because obviously the world's changing. A lot of monarchies are getting abolished. And since she's popular, she gets to stay on the throne. Now, if we would have had a king like, Richard II or Henry VIII in 1850, there would not be a monarchy right now, because they would have abolished it. But luckily Victoria was actually a good queen, so that kind of saved the monarchy, and the reason it still exists. Again, we're getting into incest here. She marries her first cousin, Albert, from the house of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, who becomes the love of her life. Kind of weird, but that's how that is. Should we give her an F for marrying her first cousin? Just kidding, we're not going to do that. So, again, she lives a long time. She lives well into her 80s. She handles the changing world pretty well. So I think she can get a very... I don't think she will get an S, but I think we can give her a very rock-solid A tier for Victoria.
Yeah.
She was obviously a major... Basically saved the monarchy. I mean, since she was a good queen, if she would have not been good, we probably wouldn't have a monarchy to this day. And obviously, what are you going to do when you're queen in the 1800s? What are you going to do? Not much, because you can't. If she would have tried at the very least to resist, she probably would have ended up getting killed, and the same thing would have happened to her that happened to Louis XVI. So, you know, she didn't have absolute power anyway in the first place, but it just keeps losing. Now there's really just these next few monarchs are 5 left, and they really just don't have any real power to speak of anymore. But we'll just use different criteria to rank them instead. Anyway, so that's Victoria. Obviously, she's queen for a very long time. Although there's a lot of kids. Her eldest son is Edward, who becomes king after her. He was born in 1841. He becomes king when he's about 60. Or 59, I think, was what he was. So he becomes king next. Edward the 7th is up. So what do you got to say about Edward the 7th, Bruno?
Edward the 7th?
Yeah.
Okay, let me look at a picture.
Alright, pull him up. He was king from 1901 to 1910.
He looks pretty cool.
He does. Is it the guy with the beard?
Very buff.
Does he have a beard?
Yeah.
Okay, you're looking at the right guy then. He was meaty, dude.
Yeah.
Again, he was a very interesting guy. He was a kind of a ladies' man too. He had a lot of affairs and stuff. And a funny thing is, he actually had an affair with a woman that Charles, Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales right now, Elizabeth's eldest son. His wife is Camilla, right? You know.
Yeah.
He had previously been married to Princess Diana, and then she died, obviously. And Camilla, during that period, was actually Charles's mistress. So Prince Charles had and Camilla was actually the great-great-granddaughter of one of Edward VII's mistresses. So Charles had an affair with the great-great-granddaughter of the woman that his great-great-grandfather had an affair with. Kind of an interesting situation there, but that's how it happened in Edward VII. I mean, he was he was majorly popular by the people. Everyone loved Edward VII. He didn't last very long, though. He was only king for about 9 years. The reason for it, though, was because Victoria lived so long, he didn't get the chance to really do anything, because he was already an old man by the time he became king. Because Victoria lived so long. And the same thing's going to happen with Prince Charles. He's old now, because Elizabeth will not die for anything. So Charles is going to be probably like 80 or 90 when he becomes king, and if he does, he's only going to rule for a few years and die. So same thing happened with Edward VII. So Edward VII, let's see, what did he do during his reign? I can't really think of much that he did. I'll pull up Find a Grave and we can see some of the stuff he did to try to rank him. Let's see here. He was the eldest son of, which is kind of disgusting when you think about him, because his parents were first cousins. So you can see kind of like a little bit of inbreeding right there. His eye looks really weird. I don't know if that's a thing of inbreed or if that's just a birth effect. I don't know what that is, but it's definitely interesting to speculate. Are you looking at a photograph of him or a painting of him?
I'm looking at a photograph.
Okay, do you see his eye looks really...
Yeah, it looks slightly off.
Yeah, I don't know if that's because of the incest or what that is, but...
Yeah.
Who knows? But anyway, again, Albert was German. Edward VII gets extra points because he shares his birthday with Nathaniel. So anyway, oh my god, we got a lot of things.
That gives him extra points?
That gives him extra points for sure. Let's see here. He founded the Royal College of Music and was one of England's leading sportsmen. That's interesting.
Wait, really?
Yeah, Edward VII.
That's cool.
That's pretty cool. His reign ended when he died suddenly after a series of heart attacks just before midnight at Buckingham Palace on the 6th of May, 1910. The 68-year-old monarch's sudden death threw his country into a state of shock. Attending the funeral were 9 crowned heads of Europe, 7 queens, and the minor royalty foreign ambassadors, representing more than 70 different countries. Holy crap. So he was a popular guy. Holy shinotic. I mean, nowadays when you're king, when the monarch dies, it's going to be all over the news because people know now when the monarch dies. Because back in the Middle Ages, it took a while for news to get out, and they wouldn't hear that the monarch died probably for a week or so after they died. But now with the modern news stuff, we have Elizabeth II can die like instantly, and she could die like in a few minutes, and we'd instantly know she's dead, just because of how fast we can get news out. She's not going to, but how fast we can get news out now. Now back in the Middle Ages, it was harder because it'd probably take them a few weeks to get that out. So, anyways, he shares a birthday with Nathaniel, so we'll give him a B. Why not? We got a nice bell curve going on here with the thing, with the tier list here. It looks cool. C's got the most, D and B are close to it. It looks good. All right, next up is George V. All right, George V is one of my favorite kings. I know I say this a lot for most of them, but he is one of my favorite. Obviously, he was king from 1910 to 1936. Now, George V was the second son of Edward VII. Edward VII's eldest son, I think his name was Alfred, and he ended up dying from a disease, and he never had any kids. He was young. And George V actually ended up marrying his fiancée, Mary of Teck. He was the guy who married his brother's fiancée. So that was how that went down. And Mary of Teck lived a long time. Fun fact, Mary of Teck was actually still alive when Elizabeth became queen, which was crazy. So we're not back all that far. Elizabeth II was born during George V's reign, and Elizabeth online, I've heard her talk about this before. She actually remembers George V and when he was king. So obviously she was the grandchild of George V, which is kind of cool. George V, obviously, what's the major event going on between 1910 and 1936 in Europe? We learned about it in history class.
What?
What's the major event what's the major conflict that goes on in Europe between 1910 and 1936 during that period? What major conflict happens?
World War I.
World War I, yeah. So that's George V is king during World War I. Obviously, he doesn't have all the power because it goes to the prime minister. Another cool thing about George V, he actually went into India, and he actually became the emperor of India, which is cool. And a lot of people don't talk about that, but he was.
Wait, actually?
Yeah, George V. He's a cool guy. Obviously, he was another one of those guys that was George. He was George V. The fifth King George, if you weren't aware. So he was cool. He was king during World War I. Again, Great Britain didn't lose anything really bad in World War I, except for the Battle of the Somme. That was a horrible defeat. I don't think we really talked about the Battle of the Somme, but that was a deadly battle. It killed millions of people. One of the deadliest battles in human history. And here's the ironic thing about the Battle of the Somme that I love. It's my favorite battle in World War I. Here's the reason why. So the battle took place on July 1st, 1916. Okay, I created my YouTube channel, on July 1st, 2016, exactly 100 years after that battle.
Is that on purpose?
No, I had no idea until like very recently, which is cool. That's why I like that battle so much. Battle of the Somme. But it was the worst defeat for Great Britain. Actually, I don't know if Great Britain lost that, but they lost a lot of people in that battle. Germany, I think they were fighting against Germany. That was the worst defeat that Britain had. Even including the Battle of Britain in World War II, Britain actually lost more, actually had more casualties in the Somme than any of the battles in World War II. It kind of varies on the country, because some countries were worse in World War II, lost more people in World War II, like the United States, and then some people lost more in World War I, like Britain. So World War I was actually worse for Britain, and World War II was actually worse for the U.S. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, again, that battle sucks, but again, I don't know how much of that is in his control, because it's really the Prime Minister who decides that stuff. And actually, I don't actually know who was the Prime Minister. You know, I'm not even going to look, I don't care. Prime Minister sucked. So obviously, he leads Britain through the war, and then in 1919, or 1918, they signed the Treaty of Versailles, ending the war, and then that happens. Obviously, he does a good job. He joins the Alliance. He's part of the Allied forces, teamed up with France and the U.S. and Russia for a little bit at the beginning, and then that kind of stuff. But this was kind of at the point where the Britain and France stopped hating each other. I don't know what clicked, but they hated each other forever. Like if you remember from my earlier episodes, I've been talking about all the way since the Middle Ages. With the 100 Years' War, Britain and France were fighting each other. William the Conqueror was from France, and he invaded England. So back then they hated each other. And it's the 1700s, and they were still fighting them in the American Revolution. They still hated each other. I don't know what clicked between this period, but now Britain and France were now allies, which was kind of weird. But I don't know. That was cool. I don't know what happened. I guess it's because both of their monarchies stopped being complete control. I guess it's because France changed to a republic in this time.
Yeah.
In that time. Now I'm not going to go too much into France. I can talk about France all day too, but I'm not going to talk about that. Anyways, that's Britain. So, dang, I really like George V, and I'm kind of biased. I feel like A's too high though. Oh dang, I'm torn between B and C. I feel A's too high. C's too low, but I don't want to give him a B because, we probably have to, because I have so many B's, and I've given so many people B's today. I guess we'll have to give him a B. He's got to be a B, because I feel like C's too low and A's too high, so we got to just put him in B.
Yeah.
Because he was definitely an above-average monarch. George V. Again, he dies in 1936. His eldest son is Edward. Now, here's what happened with Edward. This is going to be an indecisive. Do you know what happened with Edward VIII?
Do I know Edward VIII?
Yeah, do you know what happened with him? What happened to him?
No, what happened?
Okay, so he's the eldest child of George V. And George V basically says, you know what? My eldest son is a disgrace. And he's like, I hate this guy. He's going to be a terrible king. So Edward VIII, during George V's reign, he proposes, I want to get married to this American woman named Wallis Simpson, which is a very unpopular thing to do. A lot of people didn't want that. It's not because she was an American, it's because she was a twice divorced American, which created a lot of controversy in the monarchy. So basically, George V dies, obviously, of natural cause. And then Edward VIII becomes king. He only rules for 11 months. Because he abdicates, because he wants to marry Wallis Simpson. They're like, you know what? He comes up with a deal. The British Parliament makes a deal. He's like, you know what? You can marry Wallis Simpson. You get two options. You can either keep your crown and not marry Wallis Simpson. You cannot marry Simpson and keep the crown for yourself, or you can abdicate and marry her. And he chose the latter. He chose to abdicate the throne. The only king in history to give up the throne by his own right. He actually chose to give up the throne.
Wow.
So I'm going to put him in indecisive just because he was only kicked for 11 months. Again, didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. So his brother became the new king. And he was George VI. Now, George VI is an interesting story because his name was not actually George when he originally. Monarchs get to choose their reigning name, and his name was Albert. And George V, I'll get to that later. So George the Sixth, he's king from 1936 to 1952. Again, 1952, as you can see that date. He was actually Elizabeth's father, George VI was. Now, George VI, he had a really bad stutter, and he was one of the most crucial hours of the British monarchy where you need to speak, because he was king during World War II. Again, it wasn't really him doing that, but it was Winston Churchill and Neville Chamberlain, those two guys. Are you guys learning about them right now? Are you guys like Bruno?
What'd you say,
Are you still there? You're learning about World War II right now. Like, we have the same stuff. You know about Winston Churchill and Neville Chamberlain?
Oh, yeah.
George VI was the guy that appointed them. He was king at the time. So
yeah.
during the current events we're learning about in history class right now, he was the king during George VI was king of Britain during that time. Again, he had a really bad stutter issue, and he would just go and give speeches, and he would get really nervous to speak throughout the public. And that's the thing about monarchs that are different from presidents. Presidents have the whole campaign, and they're known to speak, is why they become president. Monarchs just inherit it, so you have monarchs that have mental issues, and they get nervous and stuff because they're just average citizens. And George the Sixth, he also had a very bad smoking problem, and he eventually died from that. But he was a great man, such a good man. He was probably one of the only monarch, one of the few in this that I could safely say was a good person and a good king. Most of these people can't say that. He did a great job. Without even though he had his stuttering issue, he was such a good king at the time. He actually got through the stuttering later in life and actually would give the speeches outside for the crowd and stuff. He was just a great guy. He got through his things and worked it out, and he was just a great leader during World War II and everything. Trying to keep Britain, the British people, calm during World War II when Churchill was doing all his stuff, and he did a great job of that. Just a great man, too. However, he died in his 50s because he had a lot of problems, and he had his smoking addiction, and that really caused his fate. But character-wise, great person. And I got to give him an S because he was just such a good person. I love George VI. He was a great person. Now, if we're ranking him on just as a king, I think a lot of people would rank him lower, but I'm kind of biased. I got to put him in S. So that's George VI. Now, he dies in 1952. Okay? 1952. Okay. His eldest daughter becomes queen, Elizabeth II. So now we're on to the next monarch. Queen Elizabeth II takes the throne in 1952 and reigns until this day. She's still on the throne.
Wait, Trent, that's me.
Oh yeah, that's Bruno. Bruno in my contacts is Queen Elizabeth II. Look at this. Yeah. Elizabeth II. So that's awesome. But yeah, she's been on the throne for 70 years. She actually just celebrated her 70th birthday, and I actually started the tier list just for that occasion. So Elizabeth II, I gotta give her an S too. Obviously the most attractive. Now we gotta give her an SSS plus. We gotta give her an SSS plus. She's going up there with George II and George III. Oh my God, she's so good. Obviously the most attractive monarch.
Wait, Trent, did you tell your viewers that Elizabeth II is your Valentine?
Oh yeah, Elizabeth II was my Valentine. So here's what we did. In Spanish class, we had to write hearts for Valentine's Day, and I wrote in Spanish a love letter to Elizabeth II. I mean, she's single, guys. Philip, her husband, just died last year in April. I like how I'm talking about stuttering with George VI, and I'm stuttering so bad in this video. Anyway. Actually, here's what I was about to say earlier. George the Fifth, you know how I said he did not want his eldest son, Edward, to become king? Because Edward was just, basically a really just lazy guy. He was like, George the Fifth boldly stated somewhere, he's like, I want nothing to come between the crown and Bertie and Elizabeth. Bertie was Albert, which was George VI's name. He wanted Albert to become the king, which happened. He said something. It's like, I want nothing to come between the crown, it was like something like Bertie and Lilibet, which is what the nicknames were for Elizabeth and George VI, because his name is Albert. And it's almost like he got what he wanted, because Edward VIII ended up abdicating, and Albert did become King George VI, and then Elizabeth became queen. So George V actually, his wish actually came true. Granted, after he died, but it did. So that was kind of cool. Elizabeth, obviously, I mean, she's queen for so much, 70 years, and she's handled it very well, I think. She's very popular. The British monarchy is probably the most popular it's ever been right now, and
Yeah.
I mean, when we're talking about monarchies getting abolished, I think Britain's going to be one of the last ones to get abolished because the monarchy is so popular right now. Granted, she doesn't have much power, I get that, but for what monarchs are in the 21st century, I think she's handled the chains pretty well. Obviously, she's just a freaking legend. And obviously gets an SSS Plus tier, obviously, for being immortal. That's one of the main reasons. I mean, none of these other kings are immortal except Elizabeth II. So, I mean, she's got to be SSS Plus. So, this video's been going on for over about an hour and 20 minutes. So, I think we're going to end it here, guys. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you guys think about all of these monarchs and where you would rank them and why. And, Bruno, you got anything else to say?
I've had fun ranking these with you, Trent.
Oh, yeah, Bruno.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've had a good time, too. It's nice having someone to talk to on here. But anyway,
Oh, yeah.
let's do the final rankings here so we can get, let's go bottom to top. So in indecisive, we have Sven Forkbeard, Edmund Ironside, Edward V, Edward VI, Lady Jane Grey, Richard Cromwell, and Edward VIII. Those are all the guys that didn't reign very long and didn't do anything. In F, we have Harold Godwinson, King Stephen, King John, Edward IV, Richard III, Henry VIII, Mary I, and Oliver Cromwell. In D, we have Edred, Edwig, Athelred the Unready, Harold Harefoot, Hartha Canute, William II, Richard I, Richard II, and Charles I. In C, we have Edward the Elder, Edmund I, Edward II, Henry IV, Henry VI, Charles II, James II, William III, George I, and George IV. In B, we have Edgar the Peaceful, Canute the Great, Edward the Confessor, Henry I, Henry VII, William and Mary, William II, Mary, and William III and Mary II, that is, Queen Anne, William IV, Edward VII, and George V. In A, we have Alfred the Great, Athelstan, William the Conqueror, Henry II, Elizabeth I, James I, and Victoria. And then in S, we have Henry III, Edward I, Edward III, Henry V, and George VI. And then finally, at the very top, in SSS Plus tier, we have George II, George III, and Elizabeth II.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, Bruno, it's fun having you on here. I know you couldn't really tune in too much because you're not too familiar with this, but I hope you learned a lot from these past 2 days.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can remember at least some of that.
Yeah.
Probably won't remember it all, but if you can at least take something away from this, that'll be good. Anyway, and you can go back and watch the older videos too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really all I gotta say, guys. And with that, I'll see you. Oh yeah, be sure to go subscribe to 5 Random Bros. I'll leave a link in the description to Bruno's YouTube channel. He doesn't post in a while, but you can go check out his videos. They're pretty funny.
Cool. Thanks, Trent.
Yep, no problem, Bruno. Let's get him to 100 subscribers. He's really close. And obviously, if you're not already subscribed to me, do that as well. I mean, if you're sitting here and watching me ramble for an hour and a half, you must like me. So why don't you give it a subscribe? Unless you skip to ahead, you cheater. Anyway, that's how that is. So, alright, enough rambling. I'll see you guys next time. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe. Actually, I gotta get this. Okay. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.